Hey guys, thank you very much. Thanks, Paul and Austin for inviting me, and to Mike for making the introduction. So this is me. Better get away from the speaker, it's kind of loud. It's kind of weird. That's my business card, so consider it presented. These are moo.com, I recommend them, they're really awesome. They're about 60 cents a piece, so that's why I take pictures of them rather than distribute them. Great, let's get started. Sure. Better. Weird for me. One isn't used to hearing one's voice. Great. So congratulations, your presence here tonight. Your interest in this topic is very timely and consistent with what other people are interested in at the same moment. It's no surprise that both growth hacking and growth hacker are growing. Someone's hacking that growth for sure. So just kind of put some charts up there, put some perspective on the conversation. Also, take a look at this, kind of the relative relationship between growth hacker, growth hacking, and a term dear to your hearts in this organization. You know, just kind of like interesting, right? So the point of this slide is to talk about how widespread the conversation is about growth hacking relative to where growth hacking is actually happening. So I think the wideness of the conversation is a very interesting sort of phenomenon to study all by itself, and as is sort of the semantic event that was the arrival of the term growth hack and growth hacker, which is like, 2009, 2010 period. So people are wanting to be growth hackers, are calling things growth hacks that aren't growth hacks. Underneath that, I think there's a much more interesting subject happening. So when we talk about where growth hacking is happening, and this spectrum sort of illustrates the range of things that are produced and sold, right? So it's just in a tiny little part of that spectrum, right? And yet people are interested in it much more broadly. And what I mean is sort of a small slice, actually quite small slice within software. It isn't even all of software, right? And so the reason I'm up here today, and the message I'm sort of trying to bring, is that underneath all of that noise and hype, I think there's an important change kind of happening. And if you get caught up in the, growth hacking by any other name, still marketing, if you get caught up in all that semantic side of the discussion, you'll miss it potentially. So I'm hoping to correct that tonight, at least a little bit. So the change that we're talking about is and let's not give it a name for now, right? This phenomenon. So the change that we're talking about is to how the work is done and by whom. And this is a personal opinion, bullet two. I don't think it's spreading through the conscious adoption of principles and methods, not yet anyway. So which is why I think it's particularly important message to this group, given that you're Agile marketing interested, right? So it is instead what I would describe as a proximity phenomenon. And what I mean by proximity phenomenon is, so let's think about where product and marketing get so close that they might have a kind of sex, right? That something new would arise there at that intersection. And that's only happening in sort of a very, very, very narrow place relative to the full spectrum of stuff that's made and sold. And that slice is software that is distributed on the internet, right? And the reason that it's happening there is because that is precisely where an old traditional separation between product and marketing is being eroded, or I think actually shifted, right? And that's what I'm going to talk about. And so it's happening there, and this phenomenon, growth hacking, is organizationally challenging as well, which is also one of my themes. And so for that reason, it's still mainly a startup thing where process and formality and rigidity haven't had a chance to take root, and people sometimes do things differently than they would in larger, more established organizations. And so this is, the shift of this line is what I'm describing as the edge of transformation, right? And it's the encroachment of product into marketing, right? So that's what we're talking about. And insofar as this is another example of software eating everything, you might even invoke Marc Andreessen here as another example of software kind of just eating everything up. So what I'm going to do at this point is talk to you about some growth hack case studies, and I have situated them here on this boundary line, reflecting what I see to be sort of some of the situational differences between the companies, and I'll go into that in these examples, but sort of this is the macro perspective. And so this is not only 3 case studies, this is also a timeline. It's also a trajectory of my career. So interesting that I'm dipping into the black, right? So let's start with Friend Finder. And I worked there between 2003 and 2005, just to give you a sense of what the time frame is. Anybody remember Friend Finder? Anybody know the name? Ring a bell? Yeah. I'll tell you very surprising things to you about this company that will kind of blow your mind. So this is the machine. This is how it worked, right? Sign up people. Importantly, in this machine, though, the verification of an email was extremely important. You couldn't get into the site. You couldn't have any experience beyond that. You couldn't browse profiles. You couldn't make your way into the next phase. So the email verification ratio was like the second most important KPI on a daily basis that we looked at. It was really important. And when you understand that once we got your email address, you were sort of placed into this continuous bombardment loop of email where we would send you all kinds of invocations to come back into the site and get you back into that browse profiles mode until you find that special someone that kind of caught your eye, which you had to be either browsing for or searching for. And then you'd pay to make contact with that person. So the average transaction amount was about $20, and the LTV on a paid sign was about $100. So all this stuff was extremely well understood at the company. And in fact, the reason I position Friend Finder in the green, in the marketing territory, is because I think this is sort of like, in my mind, certainly in my experience, one of the highest iterations or representations of sort of the marketing-driven, marketing data-driven, ROI, revenue optimization machine, right? So that's the model. And in the span of this 1 year, interestingly, all of the growth that Friend Finder, and when I say Friend Finder, I mean the Friend Finder network, experienced was largely on the strength of its affiliates. So something that we sort of just turned on in the 2003-2004 time frame was all of search engine marketing. We weren't paying in advance for traffic like that very much until then. So that scaled the business significantly. So I would say that, and this is public information, as you know, Friend Finder has gone public and such, and so there's an S1. But for reference, so 2003, we're talking about the $65 million a year range, and 2004 is getting upwards of 100. So that's kind of the magnitude represented there. So from a data and resource allocation perspective, what we see here is that, as I said, the marketing, there was an exceptional system created at Friend Finder that gave us the capacity to see individual traffic streams and their performance very, very finely. So that check mark for data in the marketing area shows that that was sort of the company focus, right? There was extreme obsession with the funnel with regards to its revenue consequences, right? So all of the analytical perspective of the company was aligned towards this goal. And so marketing didn't have dedicated resources in the way that companies don't normally allocate in the sort of digital marketing scenario, right? So, and neither was there what I would describe to be deep use information. So we had great analytics, but those analytics were placed largely in the service of revenue optimization. Right? There might have been larger, bigger picture considerations, growth hacks of different sorts that were not immediately revenue oriented. So we didn't really look at those. And the dashboard, as it were, by dashboard I mean sort of the thing that we're focused on at the company, looks something like this, where we're looking at number of uniques, number of signups, number of subscriptions, and then there was a great, awesome predictive element which gave us the capacity to ascertain longer-term value from an individual traffic source very quickly. So this put us in a position to evaluate traffic sources very quickly and make decisions about investment, what was working and what wasn't working very quickly. So super amazing job there. Spoiled me for anything less, forever. So what we saw is that, do you guys know what a TGP is? Anyone? Okay. So in the 2003, anyone? Someone know? All right. So in the 2002-2004 time frame, this is the pre-tube days. We're talking about adult content, right? So the pre-tube days, the TGP was sort of the prevailing free traffic model. The TGP model acquired traffic through a variety of interesting mechanics, ranging from SEO through elaborate link exchanges with other sites. But at the end of the day, this was an incredibly enormous source of traffic, right? And the way that they monetized was largely by sending traffic outward, having acquired the traffic to other pay sites where people would convert, and then they monetized their traffic that way. So it's not an exaggeration that this traffic represented on the order of 1 billion ad impressions for us on a monthly basis. And with a very tiny CTR, right? So huge impression volume, tiny CTR. And what we also see is that a local strategy is working for us on SEM, and by working for us on SEM, it means that there's value in bidding for like singles in Detroit, right? And we also see that affiliates are exploiting a local strategy. They're doing it by creating SEO sites that intersect city names, localities, and varieties of dating, and then that's sort of where they hand the traffic off to us. And so the simple idea was, let's bring local somehow to the banner, right? The idea was, hey, we see it working everywhere else. What would happen if we could affect even a tiny increase in CTR from this enormous volume of impressions that we're getting? So that's the seminal idea. And so what we're talking about in this time frame, and this seems old hat now, but it was really rather progressive at the time. There was not a lot of automation or detection of user attributes. There wasn't a lot of customization and advertising in the way that now we take for granted. So this is actually pretty forward-reaching. So the facilitating technology is IP-based geolocation, and the first attempt was something really rather ridiculous, where we found this library that would convert text to image. And so if you knew the IP address of the client, you could pass the city name into this image maker library and then print the thing on a banner, and it looked something like that. And they were really ugly because we had to sort of separate out the printable area from the rest of the image, and so that didn't really work. So ultimately, what we created was something a bit more advanced. That we realized, okay, we want to get these impressions, but we're not going to do it in a conventional sort of banner sense. So we decided instead to take sort of an embedded approach. And by embedded, I mean, so instead of working through ad networks or directly with the publisher to expose a banner in the conventional sense, right? We're now claiming some amount of page real estate for an experience that we serve externally. And that was the gist of the functioning of that. So the member database, there was a manual curation process of thumbnails, right? Attractive people and whatnot. And then that stuff went into an ad-ready form, a warehouse, if you will, and we enhanced those thumbnails with metadata ranging from where they lived to what their sexual preferences were, etc. And then from there, it took on one of these two lives. And so to the left in this ad maker, the ad maker is a self-service, grab your embed code, configure the banner to call it that in the way that you want, choose the color, how many thumbnails, etc. So it was this configuration tool that was largely offered to affiliates, and so that was exposed that way. And then also the data was available through what today we would call an API. That back then it was just an XML feed that we exposed, and that really had a significant effect. And so this for reference is kind of what these things looked like, and this is probably where you're getting what I've been talking about for a while. So very simple, right? And so another evolution that we were able to introduce here is that we were able to send now the user directly to a particular thumbnail, so kind of foregoing all this browse the profiles part of the experience, and so they could see potentially someone that they found attractive, etc., and then enter that part of the funnel with a lot more sort of sign-up energy, if you will. So you would imagine that this also had a significant improvement effect, not only in capturing traffic, but also in converting it further down the funnel. So if we were to think of the before state as being about the relationship between impressions and clicks, the after state, where we had shifted away from thinking, oh, we want to make banners, to we want to host, we want to serve up these experiences that affiliates can put on their own sites, and we also want to offer out their own experiences. So what actually happened is that essentially the API calls blew up, and along with that, the clicks. So it was really an effect that transcended our original expectations of the opportunity. And TGP revenue did something like this, right? And for context, we're talking about probably something on the order of $150 million for that blue bar, right, coming from that source. By the way, when Friend Finder was sold to Penthouse in 2007, revenues were about $360 million, right? So think about that valuation discount relative to the kinds of deals that we see happening today. So an extraordinary business that I think deserves a lot more attention. So yeah, right, we invented those, and they spread everywhere on the web. Another fact that's not known, right? I think credit is served there. So the original pitch was a banner with a twist, right? Nobody knew how technically difficult it would be, and I think that even that first ugly prototype bore results that helped escalate the further investment in the development. And as I said, the opportunity was really obvious to everyone because there was this great disparity between the impressions and the CTR. And like I said, something to be said for the powers of aiming all your analytical interest at revenue optimization. The degree to which we were able to evaluate the value of traffic was huge, right? So at its peak, Adult Friend Finder was a Alexa 11 site or so, right? Context, enormous. Cool. So moving on. The time frame is now 2008. The word growth hacker has never been said right? It's still not a part of the dictionary, nobody knows what that is. But the reason I've sort of situated Eventbrite a little bit deeper into the black territory now is because, well, I'll just go into that, you'll see. So this is the system and the strategy. You guys are familiar with Eventbrite, right? Free to use, they give away amazing publishing capabilities for your event and promotional capabilities. And if you choose to sell tickets, then the company monetizes that way. So what we did really right in the beginning is that we saw sort of the spectrum of events that people were organizing. And this is what I mean by ranging here from Reg Online, which is like your merchant account, right? The sales guy calls you up 3 times a day. How's my ticket sales? High touch, right? Fantastically enormous, overblown, fat companies that are serving this market in this way. And on the other end is light, ad-driven, confused Evite, right? But also interesting insofar as it is providing this fascinating glue through email invitations in the service of events. So what we did right is that we didn't commit to a particular part of the spectrum too soon. We kind of just took a let's wait and see what people do attitude. And we wound up pulling in all kinds of fascinating events that were, like I said, everything from big conferences to birthday parties, etc. And so the outcome of that was, like I said, we made money when people sold tickets. And there were lots and lots of events of all kinds, right? A real representation of the event spectrum that, frankly, no other business was getting because they hadn't created this awesome multi-purpose event publishing tool that you could use for anything from a conference to a birthday party. So we were getting those events. And so to give you a sense of what marketing looked like from a keyword standpoint, so these are like the important keywords in the beginning, right? Sell tickets online, obviously online event registration. And it was also interesting, and we observed this very early, that we were getting a lot of traffic for free email invitations, and that traffic converted well. Because one of the things that we also did right in the very beginning was we made this commitment to making the event organizer as successful as possible. So that focus, that orientation, made it reasonable for us to give away free email, even give away a free, cool MailChimp templated integration as part of the free Eventbrite experience. So, and I'll go into the implications of that later, but this is kind of what I'm looking at from a where am I going to get customer standpoint. So boring, expensive, low traffic, right? Not really a lot going on there of excitement for me. So to take a look at what our data and resources look like. So the reason I put a sort of encompassing gray bar across product and marketing is because being that we were at such an early stage, we are installing measurement generally for all things, right, including marketing and product at once in one consideration. So we had that perspective right from the very beginning so that we could see that a traffic stream had produced people who went on to make events, right? That was very important. Simple power, right? And so we did have we didn't officially have dev for marketing, but I put an asterisk there because the team was so small that it was very practical for a good idea to seek resources and get them. And this is what our dashboard looked like, and it was homemade, and we were stupidly running queries right off the production database and stuff, doing all these silly things in the very early days. But at the end of the day, we had this dashboard that we made, and so all of the stuff that I learned about funnel obsession from Friend Finder came directly here. So right from the very beginning, we imposed what I call a funnel discipline, right? So we saw the funnel, we saw the benefit flow. Right, and so sign-ups, number of events published, number of email invites sent. Why? Because that's a proxy for distribution, virality. It's a bigness effect, not immediately connected to revenue. Right, this is a sort of product. These These are the sorts of numbers in product that become interesting to growth, even though they're not immediately connected to the things that you might be chasing if you're doing digital marketing. There's a key difference, right? And so we're also keenly interested in the number of people who sold a ticket, users. So right away, we're not just interested in sign-ups who might, post birthday parties. We're interested in people who are selling tickets, and so that becomes the number that we optimize for. And we also looked at the gross ticket sales, and that's the value of the tickets sold. And so we had a collection rate against that, which was also an important metric. And so we had this simple SQL-driven dashboard. We also had Google Analytics, right? And so Google Analytics was important, as it turned out. So the reason Google Analytics was important is because that's where I saw that only occasionally did events pages become indexed, by accident, as it were, when a blogger who was having an event had put a link to the site. So another thing we did right was we gave people vanity URLs so that they would feel ownership over that and post it, right? It was like eventbrite.com/your event name, etc. So I noticed and I said, so I have this, so I should tell you that before coming to Eventbrite and after leaving FriendFinder, I spent like 2 years totally obsessing on database-driven sites, CMSs. To me, the fact that a few lines of PHP on an HTML page could enact anything was mind-blowing. And so I got into all this weird intersection of content, automated content synthesis, metadata synthesis. All this stuff is really fascinating to me, and that's how I got into SEO, really, just like bringing wild RSS feeds that would never meet together and seeing what happened, right? So, I've got this content obsession, particularly this UGC obsession on the brain. And so for me, what I see is we've got this engine that's spitting out n number of events a day, and then I see these two facts, right? So nobody in our SaaS space, like Reg Online, or even the younger companies like TicketLeap or Amiando and such that were sort of newer and supposedly more agile and more internet friendly, they weren't doing this. They didn't see it as part of their business, and why would they, right? Their customer is the person who's organizing an event, so the site has that dress. It's talking to them that way. So at the end of the day, even big sites that have, and by big I mean are presumably publishing a lot of events, have a sloppy job. They're not trying at all, right? So it's just, so I see, and also that unworthy aggregators, like Zvents and Eventful, by aggregators I mean they scrape. They just pull sites from initial publishers and they do better SEO and get them indexed. They seem to be getting a lot of friggin' traffic, right? So the idea was, what would happen if we, a SaaS business with, by the way, a PageRank 7, tried to do something with events content as UGC? What would Google return to us? So that was the experiment. That was the idea. And what we built was this. The Eventbrite directory, which is there still. So this is very inspired by my CMS work and my experiences working with data sets to turn them into SEO solid pages. So all of that learning comes into this spec that I, by the way, wrote during the company's first all-night hackathon. It's my contribution. I have this like developer envy, right there. I positioned this super funnel above so this is the business that we built, right? And then we just added sort of this crazy part on top that brought in a crazy amount of additional traffic. And so what that did is it completed a fortuitous loop between people who were publishing the events and the people who were seeking them. And this turned us on to something that we hadn't thought about before, which is the attendee user type. Our customer, our product is for, is this event organizer. So never did we think, we should let people who want to go to events log in and have an experience, etc. So this is what turned that light bulb on for the entire company. And that's what put us on the road to being a kind of site that had never existed before, right? Something we dreamed up, an events marketplace, which is what Eventbrite is today. And that's the genesis of that. So it was a little company, really small. Can't say enough about how that made all the difference. And hacker mentality was strong. Kevin was a brilliant leader, and he recognized all these things in us that created this amazing early environment. And I think this success is certainly owes to that. And like I said, there was a really awesome PRD as well that reflected all of my SEO learnings of the prior 2 years. Cool. How's my time? Am I good? I got like 20 minutes to go. So now, fast forward 2012. Prezi. I'm now a growth hacker by title, right? So now it's happened. But also some amazing things are also here. Prezi, extraordinary place to work. So progressive on so many dimensions. Among them, their desire to have someone come and hack growth. And so they created this role that I was privileged to come and occupy. So this is the Prezi system. You guys know Prezi? This is Prezi, by the way. So the gist is people sign up and they divide into either public or private, and that means sort of whether you don't care that your Prezis are public. So the presumption there is if you care that if you need them to be private, you probably are a business person and therefore you should pay. So that's sort of how that roughly shakes out. So some people come in and they convert over. This is a little, I should have zoomed in here, but that says upgraders. And we obsess on a trial to pay rate. So when you come in as a paid, I think I have a Facebook. When you come in as a paid user, you go into a free trial period. So this is where we actually collect. So there's this sort of like revenue funnel here. And then we have people who come in free, stay free. Some of them upgrade. But at the end, there's also this huge UGC event of public Prezis being published, to the tune of tens of thousands a day. So and so we make money obviously when people consummate on their trials. So can't say enough about the data situation at Prezi. Mind-blowingly advanced. Learned so much. So because we are a growth team now, I have dev, right? But I'm in the marketing organization, which is weird, right? But that's cool. It's a progressive step. We'll get there. So I'm in the marketing organization, but I have devs. We're the only product team that has devs outside of the product organization. Again, weird, interesting, fascinating, an experiment. And the reason I put the gray bar, so owing to the amazing analytic stack that has been set up by the data team at Prezi, and so basically it's Hadoop, and then we moved it up to EMR, so enjoying the mass scalability of Amazon in pursuit of all analytical desires. Essentially, we ran, so we logged everything we wanted, like through what's the Facebook scripting tool? Escapes me right now. Anyway, so this Loggly is another replacement. So at the end of the day, the capacity to configure our own logs, to say exactly what we wanted, to capture whatever metadata, all of that goes into raw data storage, and then if we need it later, it's there, and we kind of do cool stuff with it. And so from the raw data, you run scripts that generate particular metrics that you're interested in, complex stuff like activation rate, or where you're intersecting multiple metrics, and so we port those out every day, like 300 or 400 individual metrics a day, out to a warehouse from which. And the reason we did that is that we saw like other product teams. So we had this mandate that we could theoretically go anywhere in the product and perform an experiment, and theoretically, if we built something cool, we'd hand it off to another team for maintenance and stuff. So there's all this weird complexity, because meanwhile, there's also the desire to have clear-cut code ownership. Right, so we have this mission to be experimental, but ultimately we're rather limited by where other people are working and respect and ooh, sorry, are you running a test there? That kind of thing. And so because we wanted to work in areas, I think that also inspired me to look at what I could do, right? Because what I saw as the problem, A, was addressable this way, but also allowed me to circumvent sort of that more political, larger company kind of thing. Cool. So we're almost done. So the last stuff that I want to talk to you guys about is sort of, now that you've got this conception of this edge, how does that play out at companies? And so let's take a look at the things that are sort of pushing and pulling on this edge. So awkward user handoff, right? Like right now, like marketing owns landing pages. That's weird, right? Like, you know, why? There's this increasingly weird transition, non-existent, imaginary, arbitrary transition between, you know, the things that marketing owns and controls and then the stuff that becomes the product. Awkward, more and more. Second point is the desirability of a unified growth KPI, which includes both new and returning users, so that holistic perspective over growth where you're able to sort of chase it, particularly in a company that's already enjoying some traffic. If you're a startup, it's all new, right? But still the perspective is the same and useful. And sort of the benefits of optimizing acquisition for use versus just ROI. And sort of this is, I think, a significant maturation from the digital marketing perspective, which is sort of budget-oriented and right, sort of pre-allocated and rigid. And so the idea that we could defer ROI for other values, other benefits that might be evidence, like acquisition, like activation rate, for example. And the things that are resisting are reporting and organizational structures that still come out of that old world, that old way of thinking, right? There's just a lot of momentum in that. The siloing of actual data and insight, different systems, people don't have these conversations, that big picture that I'm so fond of never gets formed. Physical team separateness, in many cases in larger organizations, and the traditional separation between making things and selling them, which is, I think, the big psychological wall between all of this. It's holding up so much of this house of cards. And, you know, the scariness of change. So let's think of the edge in two scenarios. First, the startup. And sorry, that's a little hard to read. So phase one is kind of where we were at Eventbrite, where everything is shared. And there's even a dotted line here on the ops/leadership side for product and marketing, because, as was the case, for example, at Eventbrite, the leadership extended itself into product as it saw necessary, right, in order to make some of these things happen. And so there was that fluidity. So from an earlier phase, startups grow up in, I think, one of three ways. So again, so that's ops, dev, and data, in case you can't read it. And so the first scenario is growth hacking dies and gets replaced by digital marketing. Why? Because you hire people from this old world, and that's what they enact, that's what they build, that's what they know, right? You hire a CMO that's coming out of that world, and that's what he does. And so that's a perhaps lamentable scenario, or certainly it doesn't compromise the possibility of success, but it's less interesting to me, certainly. And then the second scenario is pretty radical, and that's where product takes acquisition away from marketing and closes that arbitrary gap, right? So the benefits of that is that engineering can be applied to MAU, and the data is all in one stack, right? And marketing is doing other things. And so I'll get into what's left in that little rectangle for marketing once acquisition has been taken away. And so the third scenario is growth hacking continues in marketing. But the caution here is that how the development rubber will meet the product road will vary from case to case, right? So if you're just working on landing pages, you're not a growth team. Right? So I think it can work, and certainly one cool possibility from this approach is that you can enjoy sort of a more coherent collective data relationship between product and marketing if if marketing has developers. And that's maybe just a function of being able to consolidate analytics, right, which the engineers can facilitate for you, because for them, the separations between measuring that and measuring this are really totally arbitrary. So, and then lastly, let's consider the edge and the enactment of growth hacking in the larger organization. And so the before scenario probably looks a lot like this, where of course marketing has no development, and ops are quite separated, and data is also quite separated. And so for them, so the general comment on doing this is, it's really hard. You have to be prepared to, I would say, transform your company. And the reason I'm commenting on this with any kind of authority is because before I took the job that I have now, I interviewed with a number of bigger companies that wanted to bring growth. So I was really suspicious of how they might actually do that. So at the end, I saw that it's actually quite hard, because, you know, do you take power away from product? I mean, so this existing stuff, it's obvious to all of you, I'm sure. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So one thing that I saw that was kind of cool, and this is what I meant about the part that might be left of marketing. So this last bullet is natural divisions, right? So both product and marketing have these hemispheres that I think are relatable. And so in product we have UX, and that's the customer voice, right? I think ultimately that's describable as a subjective consideration that I wouldn't say is data averse, but may have pursuits that are not relying on data to arrive at their conviction, let's just say. And similarly, in marketing we have content. And when I described to you that 2B scenario where product had taken acquisition, I know of an actual company here in the Valley that has done this, and they're at that like phase 2 stage. And so it's not, you know, I'm not just making this up. So there's I won't name them, it's kind of weird, but there's an actual company with which I met that has done this choice. And so they've carved out acquisition and given it to product. And so think of the possibilities of separating your leadership and your functions in this way. And so the content in marketing is you know, not to be dismissive of this stuff. I started in communications, but it's the words, it's the subjective stuff, right? And then everything else is product, potentially. So if any of you are in a position to consider enacting growth hacking at your larger organization, think about this. And that's it. Questions?
So what do you think is most optimal for an organization to grow from starting to, like, from a small company to a larger company, to integrate growth hacking into its company?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, think about some of these choices right at the early stages. If you have the benefit of being very early stage, and you have the additional benefit of having this decision to make today, when we know that there is a thing as growth hacking, and it's sort of got these ideas at least attached to it, then I would say make bold choices about your organization right in the beginning. Like I said, I'm very inspired by the example of that company that has brought acquisition into product. I think that's a bellwether. I think more companies will do that as they see the value of having one seamless perspective over all of the customer interaction. Right? Where does a product begin? You might say it begins in the ad. Why not? Right? Why not bring all of that together? So hope that helps. Other questions? Hi.
When you were at Friendfire, did you guys physically build the network?
What do you mean physically build the network?
So you have APIs on different websites. So it was like a publishing network, I'm assuming, right?
Well, don't take the word API too seriously. As I said, it was ultimately an XML feed that you could pull information from the database that would return things like a thumbnail URL, the ID of the user that would allow you to send traffic to their profile page, other metadata, like I said, about their location. So it was just pulling data from our database and in a way that made it possible for those.
Sorry. How did you attract users to get that XML?
Well, we enjoyed so all of the success that had built the company in the first place came from the affiliates, right? So there were these people who were in a ready position to say, hey, try this, to which we could say, hey, try this.
Because I can imagine that being...
Right, sure, yeah, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, we were always trying to bring improvement to this existing network, right? And so we thought maybe banners, but then no, and then it became this other thing, right? Anyone else? In the back.
Which companies do you think is doing a pretty good job at growth hacking right now?
The question is, which companies do I think are doing a good job at growth hacking? I don't know. I mean, how do you see that from the outside, right? Is it growth alone? Like I said, if there's anything I've learned is that sometimes things happen that are not premeditated, and what I tried to bring to you through these illustrations was that there is a process of deliberation and experimentation that begins with an idea, and then that can lead to something that gets built. So I don't know. I mean, who's big, right? Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt, I would say. They're doing it, obviously, however, through whatever means. Sir, with the glasses.
How is mobile and notification and texting changing some of the growth hacking?
Yeah, I mean, so mobile, and what was the middle thing?
Notifications.
Sure, yeah, notifications bring people to your app. Don't abuse them, make them relevant. We all know when they work well and when they don't. I mean, so all I can say is use them conscientiously and in ways that create value for your user rather than annoyance. That should go without saying, right? Aye.
I was fascinated by the part we talked about building products and marketing.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you examples of what falls in that ops category when you're the ops dev data.
Right.
And also when you have the growth perspective.
Yeah, so by ops, I generally meant leadership and staff, to whatever degree those things were in place.
What's the question? What was the question?
Sorry, the question was, she wished to have an example. You want to just...
I was fascinated by the differentiation between product and marketing, and since I learned best through examples, I was wondering if you could give us some examples of what fell into the ops column, and then also an example of when they had the circles at the end with growth versus acquisition, an example of those two.
Right.
So I guess the most relevant context to answer that question is Prezi, where we reported into the marketing organization, and we had our operations where we're operating as a product team, we're having daily scrums, and meanwhile there are other team members that are going out and doing, I guess, more conventional marketing, writing press releases and doing PR, and so potentially there's an opportunity for separation there, in between things that are already quite distinct. We didn't impose that by saying we are product and you are marketing, but we certainly could have with lots of rationalization, or rationale, I should say. Sir?
So these three examples were very successful. I'm sure you had many
things that didn't work.
I'm just curious if you have like a quick example of like how you rectified it.
Yeah, so what didn't work? Okay, here's something that didn't work. So we were very obsessed at Prezi with activation rate. And so the way that and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, so to everyone here, he wanted an example of something that didn't work. So our obsession and our fixity with activation as a metric was such that we had particular steps within the editor. Like we would know, we call them steps, right? And so you might be at step 1, which meant you made it into the editor, and then you might be at step 2, which means that you added an image. And so there was this fine stratification of the behaviors that cumulatively added up to activation. So one theory that we had was, hey, let's build some architecture that detects where people are in their particular part in the funnel. Let's say that we want to do this with people in stage 2 and that with people in stage 4. And ultimately we enacted an elaborate email campaign that sent people an email that kind of called them back into their incomplete Prezi. And it worked a little, but ultimately what we saw is that the limitations of the delivery method, email itself, for reaching only a percentage of people was not able to lift the metric significantly in the overall. So great idea, but it had this fatal flaw through the reliance on email for delivery. So that was a failure, even though it worked a little. Relative to the investment of development. In the back.
What would be the key
elements that growth hackers should look at with like checking stuff that you want to know?
You mean to work?
Yeah, to like the key elements you should be aware of and to launch, increase growth.
So are you asking me what growth hackers should look for in companies or what they should do to hack growth?
Sorry?
I said, are you asking me for strategic advice about growth hacking or about employment advice with regard to growth hacking roles?
No, the first one.
The first thing, such a broad territory. I mean, I've mentioned the importance of being able to bring acquisition data into relation with product use. Key thing, take that away. And very important, transformatively important, often absent. In the front.
Yeah, if I want to hire a growth hacker, what skill set should I look for?
Having done it before. Sorry? Oh, sorry, the question was what should she look for in a growth hacker when you're looking to hire one? Yeah, I mean, and I have a love-hate relationship with the whole semantic side of growth hack. I mean, I think that a growth hack is a thing that happened, it's not a role, right? Yeah, but how does that help you hire somebody? Yeah, I mean, sure, everything's a mindset. Don't get me wrong, that mindset is exciting you and it's why you're here and you're sort of interested in touching it. And anything I sort of just wanted to ground that in some tactics and truths. Question?
Would you think that making the company capable of growth hacking is structurally is more important than hiring an individual person who's going to do it for you?
Well, I would say that having a very considered plan for organizational structure is a key, and then you flesh that out. Right? So, like I said, companies are the smartest. Prezi, very progressive, but they didn't know how to do it. Precisely, it had problems, right? Ultimately, but they had the audacity to try to enact a growth team, and that deserves acknowledgement. And I think try and learn.
I'll follow up. So
yeah.
So I wanted to. I tweeted a comment you made about there's I forgot the word you used, the friction or something. It's difficult to get this kind of stuff to happen in companies.
Yes.
Any advice to get it to start happening in companies?
Yeah, you got to start at the top. I mean, this is definitely. Sorry, the question is advice for bringing growth hacking in light of all of the organizational challenges to enacting growth hacking. And I said it has to begin with leadership. The same leadership that was there, but perhaps unfettered by process and rigidity at a startup, could still make the same call at a 500-person company and just see that happen, make it happen, right? Carve out a territory for this new thing, empower it, give it data, right? Don't enfeeble it. Don't make it a consultant within the company that then has no power to do anything. One of the reasons I refused certain jobs that were offered to me, right? That's what they wanted. I'm like, that'll never work. Yes, hi.
Hi. So you talked about growth hacking as something that happens at the boundary where product and marketing meet.
Right.
And I see your examples here where the product is a service or software online.
Yeah.
Have you seen any examples where the product's an on-premise software or physical product?
No, because see, that's where I think a lot of people are interested in the conversation, but unsure how and if there's any application of these concepts to what they're doing. Right? So no, I meant to isolate rather specifically that it is just software, and not even all of software, but just software that is distributing through these ways, that has the opportunity to have the seamless, controllable experience all the way to the user directly. I mean, and this is not so different when you consider the radicalizations that we've had to these pipelines in the past. It used to be that a product was manufactured, and then marketing, advertised, but then salespeople ultimately had the interaction with the customer, right? And then sort of in many cases the sales layer was removed, and then marketing made its way all the way through to the customer, and sort of the sales part of the pipeline was disintermediated because it was irrelevant for many kinds of things, physical things that are now sold. And so all that we're considering now is sort of another shift. So tweet this. So yeah, the growth hacker is no longer the VP of marketing. He doesn't want to be, right? He doesn't want to be.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, so this actually hits quite close to home. We're a startup, just shifting over to that phase 2 mode. I was wondering, like, as a PM, I'm a product marketing manager.
Right.
So as a PMM that's product very closely and been able to enact growth hacks with products and been able to control like the entire data stream and all that. If you want to maintain that sort of startup model, like what do you do KPI wise? PMM and PM.
Well, I mean, you're a PMM. Are you focused holistically on the product, or do you have particular subsets of the product that you care about and work on?
Holistically.
Right. So.
They share the same KPIs. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if you report to someone in marketing, and what's their title? CMO, right? So I'm guessing traditional, right? Exactly. So are you being managed as sort of a content creator? Do you contribute words and imagery and then opine on the design of pages? I mean, that's my conception of product marketing. It's the interpretation of product value outwards to the customer through language and imagery and other content.
No, it's down to even helping to validate new features. It's down to experimentation within the product to increase engagement and retention.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you're interested in transitioning, I would say learn what you can, get as proximal as you can to the people that are doing the work that is actually interesting to you, and then use that to make an argument and go work somewhere else.
There's no way to force it with like KPIs.
Yeah, I mean, show when this video is made. Sit down and watch it with your boss. See what he thinks. Hi in the back. No, you. Yes, I'll get you next. No. Hi.
So I'm really interested in the point that growth hacking drives product marketing more towards owning the product, or vice versa. Growth hacking drives the product management more to integrate marketing. So, but do you see that that with SaaS application or mobile application, there's a better chance for product management to integrate marketing into the product because your customers use your product online?
Yeah, I think mobile, part of that, someone asked what's the importance of mobile, and I think certainly on mobile it's getting even more awkward, the handoff, the arbitrary handoff, right? Like who's installing the ad tracking SDK, right? I mean, so that's where sort of that separation happens. Oh, and then it comes as a request from marketing. So somewhat cryptic example. She asked, as we consider this mushiness that's happening between product and marketing, what's the significance of mobile in that equation? Is that fair? How does mobile change things? Was that your question?
Not exactly. So my question is that do you see that like SaaS application or mobile application has a better opportunity to get the data for growth hacking because when customer access the app, then you can capture a lot of customer behavior data.
I don't think that's unique to SaaS applications. I think any software has
I just mentioned both, like in parallel. I think both of them has an advantage to capture data for marketing. But please allow me to switch to another part. I think with SaaS, there's some because of the resource crunch. So there seems a conflict between doing product marketing and product development. Product management always feel that I got to build the functionality first. But do you see that is there any way that the startup product management can do a better job balancing the product marketing and product management?
Nothing but a commitment to do so. Right. Will. Yeah.
We have time for one last question. We gotta wrap it up. That you can.
I betrayed you in the back with the beard. Hi.
What do you think is the best way to learn growth hacking? Is there other trainings or workshops that you recommend?
Yeah. So I'm divided on how to respond to that sort of question. Because on the one hand, I wanna say yeah, or I would. This is the community that should produce those things, and I think this event and the learnings that have been shared here are a part of that. And so I wouldn't send you to a book. The coiner of the phrase, Sean Ellis, a friend of mine, has growthhackers.com, and they're just trying to collect articles and share learning. Go read some of that stuff. I mean, it's this conversation. And so that conversation is the inspiration for me to come and say these things, because I've been largely disappointed by the emphasis that the conversation has placed on the denial of growth hacking as merely a term that has no significance. So take that away, please. Okay.
Everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. Do we have next month locked down yet, Paul? No, we do not. We will be notifying you about next month soon, so stay tuned. Check your email. Thanks a lot for coming, everybody. We're good to go right down the street for beers.